Hi, welcome to Lights Cable Action. I'm Maria Lemieux, and I'm here co-hosting today with Mike Hale. Thanks for joining me today, Mike. We have a very educational episode. We have Greg Honorato, our manager of the head end, and Aaron Laquiere, the #1 head end specialist, I'm told. Today's topic is Wi-Fi, but just real quick before we get started on that, we're filming this like right after all the March storms, so I want to give a quick shout out to all the men and women at SELCO that kept us with power during cable during all that time. So great job, and thank you for everybody who gave us great shout outs on Facebook. Really appreciated. Everybody did a great job, and good job, Mike. I just want to give that shout out before we get started on a topic you're very excited about. Yeah. We've launched this in October of 2017, so it's been out there for a little while, and I have calmed your exuberance the last time we were on because you've been dying to talk about this. So, Mike, why don't you tell us why we're here today and what we're talking about?
Sure. I invited both Greg and Aaron to share their expertise in this on this topic of Wi-Fi. From time to time, I talk to the head end staff about what are the types of calls that are coming into the help desk. What's the frequency? What are the main issues people are having? And over the last couple of years, a lot of it has focused on Wi-Fi, and SELCO didn't have a product in the Wi-Fi market. We stopped servicing routers back in the 2013, 2014 timeframe. There were too many different routers. Some of them were very old. It's very difficult to assist somebody when you don't have a direct connection to their router. So we thought, okay, maybe we should get back in this business of servicing routers. So both Aaron and Greg spent a good part of a year researching products, doing extensive research, testing of various devices, and when it all shook out, we chose a product made by Calix, and that product is right here, and I'll let them talk about it. And so, like Maria said, in October of 2017, we launched a Wi-Fi product that we charge $9.95 a month for, and obviously it's not a required part of your internet or broadband package. We only provide it as a supplemental package to our internet. But it is starting to take off, and it has been very well received, and it is very robust, high-end Wi-Fi product that we are offering to our customers. And so with that, I would let these guys maybe talk a little bit about what we have in front of us for devices, sure, and then we can get into some questioning with them about the whole Wi-Fi world.
Why don't we start the conversation off with, okay, what is Wi-Fi?
Yeah, that's good.
Sure. So I think the best way we can describe it is it's a way for a device, computer, laptop, phone, whichever device you like, to get network connectivity without needing a dedicated cable for that purpose. So way back in the day, you'd have a cable modem, which looks like this. Now, this is a newer model. People remember the old ones were big and bulky and gray or white colored usually. This would go right into your computer, and you can only have one computer at a time. That then evolved, and we had the concept of routers come along. So now we plug our modem into our router, and now we have all, I'm not sure if you folks can see this, but we have all our Ethernet ports here. All of our computers would plug into that. Well, we've now come to a point where this device itself is actually broadcasting out, and it will allow, again, computers, tablets, phones to join via this device and connect to the network, or AKA internet, like most people are used to saying. One thing I would say, the term Wi-Fi, some people have asked, what does it mean? It's actually kind of funny because it officially stands for wireless fidelity, and it unofficially is a pretty meaningless phrase. It was just a spin-off of the term high fidelity from back in the 80s, which was more related to audio stuff, audio equipment. The term just stuck to this day, and people call it Wi-Fi, but more accurately, we're talking about a wireless network or a wireless local area network, wireless LAN. The simple definition is, I want to get on the internet. there's Wi-Fi. I don't need to connect my phone directly to this. I can browse the internet even though I'm sitting a few feet away from it. So that's the definition of what it is. Now, some people will say, well, why should we care about Wi-Fi? Well, it's become pretty apparent nowadays that most subscribers of any internet service, whether it's SELCO, whether it's one of the big guys, there's an expectation you're getting a Wi-Fi router when you get an installation. So that was a huge motivation, as Mike said, why we wanted to jump back into this. But so many devices are coming with Wi-Fi built in. Smart TVs now have Wi-Fi. Literally, refrigerators, washing machines, stoves in your kitchen are coming with Wi-Fi, so you can literally remotely monitor the timer on the roast that's in the oven. And this is
Thermostats,
I was gonna say
right?
Nest, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Alexa, set a timer for 10 minutes, please.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
open your garage door, lock your doors, all that kind of stuff. Right?
For sure. And so not only is Wi-Fi ubiquitous and people expect it, but you also need to have a product that can handle all of these devices, and especially devices that are using a lot of bandwidth or a lot of data, which we'll get into in a little bit later in the show. But obviously at the core of Wi-Fi is mobility. If I had to run a physical cable to every thermostat in my house and every oven and every stove, that would be very expensive and
even every computer.
Right, very time consuming, and nobody wants to deal with that, especially, you know, if you've got an older house where it really isn't that easy to work inside the walls. It can become incredibly time consuming and expensive. So it's much easier to have a router right in the middle of your house.
Let's talk about having it hard, before having to have it wired into like your different devices and
Yeah.
how, which is faster?
Well, wired typically has always been faster. What has happened in recent years, though, is the wireless technology has improved to such a degree that for most people, the speed advantage of wired is not worth the fact that you have to be tethered physically to a device. So I could have 5 or 6 iPads in a house all streaming Netflix at the same time over wireless, and there's no issues whatsoever. If I had those iPads, let's pretend they were computers, and now I had to run 6 50 or 100-foot network cables all around my house, that really changes my opinion on whether I want to have those devices watching Netflix. Is it really worth it at that point? So it's a lot easier to just be able to walk around the house and say, hey, I'm in the kitchen. I need to look up a recipe, for example.
Let's talk about the house.
Yeah.
And you talk about these older houses. What impact does a house and the walls in the house have upon the wireless and in your access to the internet?
Sure. And actually, Aaron and I both have some personal experience on this, which we can get into.
Great.
We have both kind of, well, I guess we've been good or bad influences on each other, depending on how you look at it. But we've both dove into the smart home market, and we've started going with smart light switches, smart thermostats. And it's really funny because my house was built in 1950, solid construction, plaster walls, a lot of concrete. And I had to literally install multiple wireless routers in my house to get signal everywhere because the walls were so thick. And now, in some cases, it was only a distance of maybe 20 feet, and it was just my walls were so thick that the signal was getting just completely blocked by my construction. That, I would say, is probably the number one pitfall, is what your walls are made out of. And I'll let Aaron elaborate on this now.
Yeah, I mean, with my house, everything just seems to work perfectly fine. I have newer construction, and the design of the walls and the materials used, Wi-Fi just works better. I can reach every corner of my house without a problem. But let's say I had tile walls, or I had a mesh backing on my walls. Metal's terrible for Wi-Fi, so it's going to cause a ton of problems. Tile's thick; frequencies don't penetrate the tile as well as they do, let's say, like a drywall or wood framing. So I have no problem at my current location, but I used to live in a 3-bedroom apartment, and 2 bedrooms away I wouldn't be able to get Wi-Fi service from the router because it was an old construction model home, and so I had to run wires and create a hotspot and that kind of thing. But there are limitations to Wi-Fi, but it's usually the location it's in, not the equipment itself.
Or
the size of the property, is that a factor?
It can be. I think by and large, bigger houses tend to be less problematic than smaller ones, only by virtue of the fact that they're typically newer. drywall, as Aaron said, is a lot thinner than what walls used to be made out of. That being said, there's obviously limitations. I mean, if you have a 2,500 square foot house, let's say, and you have a pool in the backyard, no matter where your router is located, by the time you physically walk out to the pool, there's a good chance that enough distance has been traversed where you're going to lose signal. That being said, it may not be the case. We had a coworker that had his router in his basement, could not get signal on his first floor. And I mean, we're talking literally, this should only be a 5 to 10 foot, difference in distance. And it turns out that he had a floor heating metal grid under the tiles.
Radiant floor.
Yeah, and
and
that's going to block
And
it.
it turned out that just having that metal there was totally deteriorating his signal. And so move the router up to the main floor and boom, everything works great now. So
He also has tile on all his walls. He's a terrible example.
yeah, that was about the worst case scenario when it comes to Wi-Fi scenarios. But we got it working, which was the good news anyway.
Well, yeah, but this is good to talk about too, because I think, as our customers use the Wi-Fi and you're providing them with this unit, and they're like, okay, I'm not getting it. Like, what are the other pitfalls to having Wi-Fi other than, okay, the construction of your house?
Yeah, so I think one other thing I get into is some people think that what type of router you have or Wi-Fi router doesn't make a big difference. And the reality is it does. I'm not going to sit here and say that everybody has to spend an arm and a leg on a router, but there are routers that are off the shelf at your average big box store that might cost you $100. That's just not going to get necessarily the full speed you may be expecting, or it might get the full speed, but as soon as you start to introduce more devices to your network, things are going to bog down. So you want to make sure you have a good Wi-Fi router. We actually, it's just maybe a good time to talk about the model we have a little bit. Would you rather hold off on that?
I just one more question, because we're talking about
Sure.
speeds. So broadband speed, it's not only the router, but it's also the broadband speed.
Yeah, I'm
right?
sorry, and Aaron, why don't you talk about that?
Sure,
Because
yeah.
he's
Yeah,
actually
'cause
our,
think,
that's
yeah.
an excellent question,
Yeah.
because when people do speed tests, the speed test is to usually a hard. When you guarantee a speed, it's to a hardwired device, not a wireless device. And so-
Correct.
And when you give an explanation, kind of share some of
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. So, I mean, like with SELCO, for example, we offer, different tier speed packages. When we offer those packages, that speed is in an ideal scenario, right? So, obviously a wired connection we're talking, because as we just discussed, there are all kinds of frequencies in the air that can interrupt the wireless connection. So ideally when you're talking about speeds and wireless performance, the higher the speed, the bigger your pool or bandwidth pool is to allow for some of those, frequency inconsistencies to allow for better performance. So if you have, let's say 200 megabytes of data per second download speed, you have a much larger pool than a 100 megabit connection. So let's say you're fluctuating by 10%, you're still much higher speed, right? And your average is going to be better than what you're going to get with the lower packages. And when you're talking about multiple users, it's a finite number. You have 100 or 200, let's say, for speed. That's what you have. If every single user, let's say you have 10 users and they're all using 20 megs at the same time, you've now hit your threshold. You cannot go over that threshold. It's a finite number. So the larger that number is, the more speed intensive things you can do with more devices. And that's like usually the biggest thing that people get hung up on is, yeah, you have that speed, but that speed is not guaranteed for 10 different devices if they're all trying to use it at the same time. So larger pool, typically better performance.
and I think actually a good analogy, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen these, but there are these adapters you can buy for your garden hoses outside that let you connect two things to one hose, right? Typically speaking, every time you do that, half of the water pressure is coming out of each side. So now if you envision that, and let's say you get a bunch more of those Y adapters and you just keep stacking them up on top of each other. By the time you get 6 or 7 layers deep, every one of those outputs is going to be trickling water because it's trying to spread it between so many. In some ways, you can look at wireless in a similar sense that there's a split going on, and it has to be shared among everything that's on the network. I think where the analogy fails, though, is you could have one device using 95% of the water supply, and then 5% is left over for everything else. So it's important to also look at what are your devices doing. You know, I could have literally 50 iPads online at the same time. If all they're doing is checking email and downloading an occasional update, that's combined less bandwidth than probably one Netflix stream.
Okay.
So, you know, we'll hear stories from customers about, you know, my internet's really slow, what's going on? We do some investigating and we say, well, you're streaming 6 different Netflix, Amazon videos, whatever's at the same time.
Or gaming.
Or gaming, exactly, and you only have this much bandwidth,
Yeah.
so you're choking your internet connection right now. So that's absolutely important as well.
And before we get into why Aaron and Greg and the rest of the staff picked this device, I think it's important to say that SELCO isn't trying to sell wireless. That we're you know, as much, we're nonprofit. So by going into the Wi-Fi market, it's more of a service to our customers than a business opportunity for us. That being said, when I asked these guys to research this, it was with the mindset that let's get something that's as good or better than anything out there. So a so-called Cadillac, because Wi-Fi is the future, along with cellular. And why not get something that's going to sustain over time? And so they came up with this, and I think there are devices you can buy at Best Buy for $200 or $300 that are outstanding routers, but we wanted to pick one router that we could service uniformly, and I let them explain a little as to why they chose this product from Calix, which I don't think can you buy in a retail store?
No, they don't do direct-to-consumer sales, I don't believe, at this point.
But the other thing too is that, you know, you could go out and buy the router, but you have no idea what.
It's not managed.
But it's not managed, and you don't know what broadband width it's going to support, and you can buy something that's not going to support that. Is that right?
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, like Mike alluded to earlier, you know, the reason why we got into the back into the Wi-Fi business is because of the amount of calls we were getting to our help desk. It's not about being for profit. It's how can we help the people who are calling, because they were calling us anyway, so we might as well offer a product for them.
Well, it's definitely a supplement to a broadband product, correct?
Yes.
You know, that's a service that we're
So
offering.
do you want to talk a little bit about the Calix device and its features and why you went with this and how it might differentiate between a you know, something you could buy at Best Buy or wherever else you buy your electronics, Amazon?
Well, can it support, like, I mean, obviously it can support our largest broadband, right?
Yes.
And can it get larger?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, the speed of the router at this point is faster than any package we offer to residences in town at this point. I think we don't want to put people at home to sleep, so I won't get into all the technical jargon, but what I'll say is this is a very high-end device. If you're familiar with any of the latest Wi-Fi technology or buzzwords, this device probably supports them. We wanted a solution that was going to be relatively easy for both SELCO to manage and install, but also for the customer to use. And you know, the bottom line is you're not getting a router because you want to use your router. You want to use your internet connection. If you're thinking about the router, it means something's probably not working correctly. Okay. So we have a pretty good installation process down. We try to do site surveys. We try to locate these devices as centrally as possible in the location when the technician's on site. Our help desk, our remote support staff, they support these devices just like we do with everything else. But one of the huge advantages we have is the ability to have some remote access into these devices. We can push configuration. We can remotely do updates. One of the most common calls we get for Wi-Fi is, I forgot the password to my Wi-Fi network. We've made it nice and easy, so every device has a unique default Wi-Fi network name and password. So every customer that gets one of these has their own unique password and network name. There's a sticker right on the device that tells you what it is. If you customize it and you forget it, that's totally fine, because our call center folks can go in and remotely change it for anybody. It makes it nice and easy. We can reboot these things if there were problems. So we've tried to make it so we can help people without them needing to wait for a service call, at least to as much a degree as possible.
So Aaron, can you tell us what the features are that this unit provides the consumer?
The managed features.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the biggest things when reviewing models to choose, we wanted to make sure that we chose a model that had a robust management system, not only for our help desk technicians, but also for the customer themselves. So you can manage your privacy settings, parental controls, all of that is available to you as a consumer of the product. And you can go in and you can change, what users are accessing the internet, what times they're allowed to access the internet, how much, you can even do how much bandwidth. I mean, that's going to get a little bit more technical, but the options are there to you. And if you want to have it as easy as possible, you don't even have to access the device. You can get an app from us that our guys can help set up, and you can manage the Wi-Fi settings via your smartphone or tablet, and it allows you to have full control of the technology. Or if you want to be hands off, you can call our help desk guys and they'll set it up. They'll set the settings for you that you want, or you can take it already optimized when we install it. So unlike what you would get at a retail store, it's already going to be set up for you the moment our technician installs it in the home. We've already done all of the setup process behind the scenes.
That said, I think it'd be nice to share one little anecdotal story.
About the parental control?
Yeah, about the parental controls. And we had one customer who couldn't get their router to work. The wireless just was not working. And these guys spent some time trying to figure out, what the heck is this? All the levels seem right. But he or she had gone in and mistakenly set the parental controls for it to only operate between 1 and 2 p.m.
On a Monday.
On a Monday. So you got to be careful when you're going in there yourself. And you might be, unless you're very tech savvy, you might be better off calling the help desk.
And are they doing it through, did they do it through the app?
Yeah,
Like it's basically like setting it up through the app and like going through a calendar or something
Yeah,
like
the
that?
app is called Net Valet, which gives you access to all that stuff. The good news is in that situation, we were able to remotely reset the parental controls pretty easily back to a working condition, which is, again, the whole advantage. I did want to just point one other thing, too. Obviously, we want to do as much of this remotely as we can, but if it comes down to it, we're still going to send a technician to help out if there's a problem on site. I don't want to sound like this is remote support only, obviously.
But Greg, we haven't really been experiencing that much of.
No, we've had very, very few issues to date, which has been great.
Yeah.
So
And all of the issues have been able to be fixed remotely, which is nice because it saves you time.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to ask, so when you guys go in and do the install, so does the technician sit there and like go through the app and set up all that with you?
So in terms of parental controls, we provide it. We don't typically walk people through setting it up, but we are planning to have some documentation online as soon as we can get it together. But what the technician will do is, we call it a site survey, but it's essentially looking at the actual airwaves to figure out where the best place to have this router located is, and we will help you set out, or I should say connect any and all of your devices to the network. So we've been trying to tell people, and I know it's really hard to remember stuff on the fly, but any device you want joined to Wi-Fi, let the person know when the installation's happening. Phones, tablets, computers. We want to take this all at once and get you up and running all at once, so you don't have to call back and say, oh, I forgot my daughter has a tablet, I didn't join it to the Wi-Fi, can you help me? Not that we won't do it, but we want to get you up and running as soon as possible.
And avoid the service call later.
Exactly,
right?
and I know
Yeah.
it's frustrating for
Yeah.
people too. You get home from work, the last thing you want to do is troubleshoot your internet connection. You want to just use it. So if we can get
Right.
stuff done
or
ahead
if your
of time.
daughter's not home when
Right.
you do the install.
Right.
For sure.
Which I guess, you've touched upon it, you've talked about it just now, what devices is supported by the Wi-Fi. Is there anything else you can think of that would?
The only thing I would say is there are some much older devices, and I'm not going to say they won't work, but they can be more tricky to get to work at times. But by and large, we really haven't had many or any issues in terms of I have a random phone and it just doesn't work properly. It's been successful so far.
Greg, if you do decide to buy your own router, which many people do, what do you think is if you buy, kind of a state-of-the-art one for $300, what do you think the life expectancy is on something like that because I know the help desk gets calls and they ask the customer, well, how old is your router? Well, it might be eight years old, and so it's, an 8-year-old router is a dinosaur in in tech world. So it's one of those things that if you're not going to use our service, what kind of advice do you give people?
Yeah, I mean, not everyone in the world would agree with me on this, but I personally wouldn't plan on getting much more than 5 years out of a router. Not to say that it's necessarily going to physically break down in 5 years, but there's bound to be some feature or option or setting that gets added in, and it's just how it works. The old stuff isn't going to get the new features. If you want the new features, you need to upgrade. Recently, the big additions have been, how do we get Wi-Fi so people with all these devices can get these devices all on at the same time and actually have a working connection? Next year, 5 years from now, it could be different. I mean, if we get to a point where every appliance, thermostat, light switch in your house is Wi-Fi, we could be looking at homes with a couple hundred devices that need Wi-Fi access, and those are the types of developments that can totally change the equation, and it's so hard to predict what's going to happen. But my rule of thumb is 5 years.
And retail manufacturers aren't going to be, sending you mail notifications telling you to upgrade the firmware on your device and that kind of thing. And that stresses the life of the product,
Because they want you to buy another one.
Right, exactly. Like, why they're not going to advertise, hey, you're 4 revisions late, like upgrade your service. So that's something that with managed options you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, the benefit of this router is it's a very expensive product, but because we're buying them in bulk, we get a pretty good discount, which allows us to charge a reasonable rate to the customers. Again, we're not in this to make money. We're in it to provide a service to the customers that we feel is as good as there is out there. So that's why we got back into the wireless business, and we wanted to get in with a single device that we could become experts in and service the needs of the customers, rather than having our help desk and our technicians learn. We could easily get in and charge a fee to service any router that someone buys commercially, but we have to learn every manufacturer's models and all the different settings for each one. It's just, we're not set up for that. We're not a Comcast of the world. We are a small shop, so.
But even still, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a great product.
Yeah.
And you guys all understand it, and it has such capabilities. I don't think it's anything that people wouldn't be happy with.
Yeah, and the uptake has, we've been adding probably 60 to 70 customers a month, so it's been very well received with very few, issues or problems coming into the help desk.
Yeah. We had one person that was a avid gamer and tried it out and then just decided that he wanted to go buy his own. He said, nothing wrong with it. I don't have a problem. I just would rather have my own. And that's fine. And then we had one install that we did have to go back and relocate because the signal was a little off. But other than that, it's been almost all positive.
Good. That's what we like to hear, right? Everything going really well. So again, thank you so much for coming
problem.
and providing us all this great information about the Wi-Fi. You guys definitely know the product, know your stuff, appreciate it, all the hard work that went into researching this. And again, $9.95 a month.
And we're not, we're not going to market the heck out of this thing. It's just, if you want a managed product, we have one for you. We think it's very good. If you want to do it yourself, you're more than welcome to do it yourself. So thank you.
But you don't get this expertise, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.